My name is Brian Whitaker, and I'm about to tell you the story that changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, success, and what it really means to find your worth. I'm 34, born and raised in Houston, Texas, and for the past 6 years, I'd been grinding my life away at NextGen Solutions, a Silicon Valley startup that promised to revolutionize data analytics. I was their head of product development, the guy who turned caffeine into code and sleepless nights into breakthrough innovations. For months, I'd been preparing for this moment, the Tokyo International Tech Summit. Our CEO, Marcus Chen, had personally chosen me to present our flagship AI platform to a room full of Japanese investors, tech giants, and industry leaders. This wasn't just another presentation. This was my shot at finally being seen as more than just another worker bee in the corporate hive. This was my chance to prove that Brian Whitaker from Houston wasn't just good at following orders, but capable of leading the charge. The flight to Tokyo had been brutal. 14 hours of cramped seats and recycled air, but I'd spent every minute rehearsing. I knew every slide, every transition, every pause for emphasis. I'd practiced my pronunciation of Japanese company names until my tongue felt numb. I was ready. To keep listening to this beautiful and special story, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. Standing in my hotel room that morning, looking out at the sprawling maze of Tokyo's skyline, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement. The city hummed with an energy that was completely foreign, yet somehow familiar. The smell of fresh yakitori drifted up from the street vendors below, mixing with the crisp October air. Everything felt possible. I'd worked 80-hour weeks for this moment, missed my nephew's graduation, skipped dates, postponed that trip back home to see my aging parents. But it was all going to be worth it. Marcus had told me this presentation could change everything for the company, and for me. What I didn't know was that while I was perfecting my slides and practicing my delivery, Marcus was making phone calls to New York. Phone calls I knew nothing about. The Tokyo Convention Center was massive, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like metallic fingers. Walking through those doors, briefcase in hand, I felt like I was stepping into my future. The conference hall buzzed with conversations in Japanese, English, and languages I couldn't identify. Everywhere I looked, there were suits, tablets, and the kind of confident energy that only comes with serious money. Our booth was positioned perfectly, center stage, impossible to miss. The NextGen banner hung proudly above a sleek display of monitors, showcasing our AI demo. I'd helped design every element of this presentation. This was my baby, and I was about to introduce it to the world. Marcus found me an hour before showtime, his usual composed demeanor replaced by something I couldn't quite read. "Brian, there's been a slight change of plans," he said, his voice carrying that careful tone executives use when they're about to ruin your day. "What kind of change?" I asked, though something in my gut was already screaming warnings. "David Morrison flew in from New York this morning. He's going to handle the presentation." The words hit me like a physical blow. David Morrison, the guy who'd been with the company for exactly 8 months, who'd never touched our core product, who spoke in corporate buzzwords, and had probably never written a line of code in his life. "Marcus, I've been preparing for this for months. I know this product inside and out. David doesn't even understand the technical architecture." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's already decided, Brian. You'll be there for technical support if needed." Technical support. After 6 years of bleeding for this company, after creating half the innovations that got us to this point, I was being demoted to technical support, in front of hundreds of the most important people in our industry. I wanted to argue, to fight, to demand an explanation that made sense, but we were in public, surrounded by potential clients and competitors. So I swallowed the humiliation and nodded. "Fine," I said, though nothing about this was fine. But Marcus wasn't done. "One more thing. We're announcing David as the new VP of Product Development today. Congratulations on your promotion to Senior Technical Advisor." And there it was, the final twist of the knife. Not only was I being replaced for the most important presentation of my career, I was being demoted, while they smiled and called it a promotion. Sitting in that audience, watching David Morrison fumble through slides I'd created, was like watching someone else wear your skin. He mispronounced technical terms, skipped crucial explanations, and delivered my carefully crafted jokes with the timing of a broken metronome. The Japanese investors sat politely, but I could see the confusion in their eyes. 20 minutes into what should have been my moment of triumph, David called me to the stage. "I'd like to bring up our senior technical advisor, Brian Whitaker, to handle some of the more detailed technical questions." The applause was polite, but sparse. I walked up there knowing exactly what this was, being thrown the scraps while someone else got the feat. As I took the microphone, I looked out at faces I'd hoped to inspire, now looking at me as nothing more than backup support. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom in public. Sometimes it clarifies everything. Standing there answering questions about algorithms I'd designed while David took credit for my work, I realized something fundamental had shifted inside me. This wasn't just professional disappointment. This was the moment I understood that loyalty and hard work meant nothing if you were working for people who saw you as expendable. The questions from the audience were sharp, technical, and completely beyond David's capability. For 30 minutes I essentially gave the presentation I should have been giving from the start, while he stood behind me nodding like he understood anything I was saying. When it was over, the applause was stronger. Several Japanese executives approached me directly, asking for my contact information, complimenting the technical depth of our solutions. But every handshake felt hollow because I knew they'd remember David as the presenter, and me as the guy who cleaned up his mess. Marcus found me afterward, all smiles and congratulations. "That went great, Brian. David really knocked it out of the park." I stared at him, this man I'd trusted, this CEO I'd believed in, and felt something die inside me. Not anger, that would come later. This was something colder, more final. The death of faith. "Yeah," I said. It was something else. After the disaster disguised as a presentation, I found myself at the hotel bar, nursing a whiskey and trying to process what had just happened to my career. The bar was one of those ultra-modern Tokyo establishments, where everything glowed with subtle LED lighting, and the whiskey cost more than I used to make in a day as a junior developer. That's when I met Yuki Tanaka. She was sitting 2 stools down, wearing a sharp business suit, and radiating the kind of confidence I'd just watched get stripped away from me in public. When she spoke, her English was precise, almost musical. "You're the technical expert from the next-gen presentation," she said. It wasn't a question. I looked up from my glass. "That's one way to put it. I'm Yuki Tanaka, CTO at Sakura Innovations. We were considering a partnership with your company." She paused, studying my face. "We're being the operative phrase." Something in her tone made me look up. "What do you mean?" She turned her stool to face me directly. "I've been in this industry for 15 years. I can spot a political execution from across a conference hall. What I saw today wasn't a presentation, it was a humiliation. No one had acknowledged what had really happened. Everyone at NextGen was pretending this was normal, that this was how things were supposed to go. But this stranger, this brilliant woman I'd just met, had seen it clearly. "Your technical knowledge is exceptional," she continued. "Your explanations were clear, passionate, informed. But the man who was supposed to be presenting your work, he couldn't answer basic questions about his own product." I took another sip of whiskey, feeling the burn. "Politics. More than that," Yuki said, and her next words hit me like lightning. "What I watched today was a company destroying its most valuable asset to protect someone's ego. And in my experience, companies that operate that way don't survive." She was right, and I knew. But hearing it from someone outside the situation, someone with no reason to lie to me or spare my feelings, made it real in a way I hadn't been ready to face. "The question is," she said, finishing her sake, "what are you going to do about it?" I didn't have an answer, not yet. The next morning brought news that made everything crystal clear. I was having breakfast in the hotel restaurant, trying to make sense of noodle soup at 7 a.m., when my phone exploded with notifications. Text messages, emails, missed calls, all from colleagues back in Silicon Valley. The first message I opened was from Sarah, our head of marketing. "Brian, what the hell is happening? The Japanese deal fell through. Sakura Innovations pulled out completely. Marcus is in full panic mode." The second was from Tom in engineering. "Dude, 3 more investors just withdrew their offers. Word is spreading that we don't know what we're doing. They're saying the presentation was a disaster." But it was the third message that really got my attention. It was from Jessica, Marcus's assistant. And it was sent by accident. David Morrison's background check came back problematic. His previous company is threatening legal action for stolen IP. Marcus is freaking out but can't fire him yet because of the optics. I set my phone down and stared out at the Tokyo skyline. The pieces were falling into place. David hadn't been brought in because he was better than me. He'd been brought in because Marcus had made a deal. Probably a financial one. Probably involving investors who wanted their golden boy in a visible position. And now that golden boy was about to become a liability. My phone rang. "Marcus. Brian, We need to talk. I'm sure we do. There's been some developments. The Japanese partnership isn't moving forward as planned. I almost laughed. You mean they saw through the charade? It's not like that. Marcus, what exactly did you think was going to happen? You put someone who doesn't understand our product in front of the most technically sophisticated investors in the world. Did you think they wouldn't notice? The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Brian, I need you to know that your technical expertise is still incredibly valuable to this company. My technical expertise has always been valuable to this company. That's not what this is about. More silent. I made some decisions based on information I had at the time, he finally said. What information? But I already knew he wouldn't answer that question. Couldn't answer it, probably, because the truth was that he'd traded my career for whatever deal had brought David Morrison into the picture, and now that deal was blowing up in his face. I'll be back in San Francisco tomorrow, I said. We can discuss my future with the company then. But as I hung up, I realized I was already thinking about it wrong. It wasn't about my future with NextGen anymore. It was about my future, period. That afternoon, instead of flying back to San Francisco as planned, I did something that 6 months earlier would have been unthinkable. I changed my flight and stayed in Tokyo. For 6 years I'd been the loyal soldier, the guy who took on extra projects without extra pay, who worked weekends, who believed that dedication and excellence would eventually be rewarded. I'd promised myself I'd never be the kind of person who burned bridges or acted impulsively. I was professional, reliable, steady, all the things my Texas upbringing had taught me to value. But sitting in that hotel room, watching my phone buzz with increasingly desperate messages from Marcus and increasingly schadenfreude-filled updates from colleagues, I realized that being professional and reliable had gotten me exactly nowhere. It had gotten me publicly humiliated, and then blamed for the consequences. So I made a call. Yuki, this is Brian Whitaker, from yesterday. Brian-san, I was hoping you would call. You said something yesterday about companies that destroy their valuable assets. I think you might be right. I'm always right about these things. It's why I'm a CTO. I could hear the smile in her voice, and for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled too. I want to hear more about Sakura Innovations, I said. And I want to hear about your plans for the future. Are you free for dinner? I looked at my laptop, where emails from NextGen were piling up, each one more frantic than the last. Marcus had sent 4 messages in the past hour, each one asking where I was and when I'd be back. I'm completely free, I said. That dinner changed everything. Yuki didn't just offer me a job, she offered me a partnership. Sakura Innovations was developing AI solutions for the Japanese market, but they needed someone who understood Western business practices and could help them expand globally. She'd been looking for the right technical partner for months. Your presentation yesterday, the real one you gave when you took over, that showed me exactly what I was looking for, she said over the best sushi I'd ever tasted. Technical depth, cultural adaptability, and the ability to think on your feet. But I don't speak Japanese. I don't need you to speak Japanese. I need you to speak technology. And from what I saw yesterday, you're fluent. By the end of the evening, we had the framework of a deal. I would stay in Tokyo for 6 months, helping Sakura develop their international strategy while they helped me understand the Japanese market. After that, we'd evaluate a more permanent partnership. It was exactly the kind of impulsive, bridge-burning move I'd always sworn I'd never make, and it felt absolutely right. The next week in Tokyo was like living in a completely different world. Working with Yuki and her team at Sakura Innovations, I remembered what it felt like to be valued for my mind, instead of just my output. They didn't just want me to execute their vision. They wanted my vision to help shape their future. The Sakura offices were in Shibuya, right in the heart of Tokyo's tech district. Every morning, I'd walk through the famous crossing, surrounded by thousands of people, all moving with purpose, all part of something bigger than themselves. The energy was intoxicating. But it wasn't just the work that was different. It was the culture. At NextGen, every conversation was a competition. Every meeting a battle for resources or recognition. At Sakura, collaboration wasn't just encouraged. It was assumed. When I proposed improvements to their core algorithms, Yuki didn't see it as a challenge to her authority. She saw it as an opportunity to make something better. In Japan, we have a concept called Kaizen. She explained one afternoon as we worked late in the office. Continuous improvement, always asking, how can this be better? Not who gets credit. Not who's in charge, just how can this be better? It was the opposite of everything I'd experienced in Silicon Valley, where innovation was often secondary to politics and credit was hoarded like currency. 3 days into my extended stay, I got a call from Tom back in San Francisco. Brian, you need to know what's happening here. It's a complete meltdown. According to Tom, the fallout from the Tokyo presentation had triggered a cascade of disasters. The failed Japanese partnership had spooked other investors. David Morrison's background issues had become public, leading to awkward questions about due diligence. Worst of all, 2 of our biggest clients had decided not to renew their contracts, citing concerns about technical leadership stability. Marcus is telling everyone you'll be back next week to clean up the mess. Tom said, I'm not coming back next week. What do you mean you're not coming back? I mean, I'm not coming back, Tom. Maybe not ever. The silence on the other end was long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Jesus. Brian, you're really doing this. I'm really doing this. And for the first time since I'd made the decision, saying it out loud felt completely natural. I wasn't running away from NextGen. I was running towards something better. A week later, Marcus finally called. Not texted, not emailed, called. It was 3 a.m. Tokyo time, which meant it was late afternoon in San Francisco. The perfect time for a desperate CEO to make a desperate phone call. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Brian. Marcus. The silence that followed was heavy with everything neither of us wanted to say. He knew why I'd stayed in Tokyo. I knew why he was calling. But neither of us was ready to acknowledge the reality of what was happening. The board is asking questions, he finally said. I'm sure they are. They want to know when you're coming back. What did you tell them? More silent. In the background, I could hear the familiar sounds of the NextGen office. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing. The low hum of startup energy. It felt like listening to a life I used to live. I told them you were exploring opportunities in the Japanese market for the company. That's not exactly true. Isn't it? I mean, technically, if you're learning about Japanese business practices. I understood what he was doing. He was trying to spin my departure as a strategic move, something that served NextGen's interests rather than admitted to its failure. It was such a perfectly Marcus move, turning a crisis into an opportunity narrative. Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back. Not next week, not next month. Not ever. The silence this time was different. Heavier. Fine. Brian, I think there's been a misunderstanding about what happened in Tokyo. No misunderstanding. I know exactly what happened. If this is about David, I can explain, it's not about David. It's about 6 years of my life that I gave to a company that saw me as replaceable. It's about being loyal to people who weren't loyal to me. It's about finally understanding that my worth isn't determined by how much abuse I'm willing to tolerate. I heard him take a shaky breath. The company needs you, Brian. The company had me. For 6 years the company had me, and when it mattered most, the company threw me away for someone shinier and newer who turned out to be a fraud. If you come back, we can fix this. There's nothing to fix, Marcus. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. When I hung up, I realized my hands weren't shaking. For the first time in years, I felt completely calm. 3 months into my partnership with Sakura Innovations, I was walking through a night market in Harajuku, sampling street food and trying to practice my rudimentary Japanese with vendors. When my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Brian, it's Marcus. His voice was different, smaller, somehow broken. Marcus, how did you get this number? I need to tell you something about what happened. About David, about the whole thing. I stopped walking. Around me, the market buzzed with life. Teenagers in cosplay, families sharing takoyaki, couples holding hands under paper lanterns. Life moving forward, life being lived. David Morrison was never my choice. The board brought him in as part of a merger deal that fell through. His previous company was threatening to sue us if we didn't hire him. Something about stolen IP that he claimed we'd used. It was all bullshit. But the legal costs would have killed us. I found a quiet spot away from the crowd and sat down on a bench. So you threw me under the bus to protect the company from a lawsuit. I threw you under the bus because I was scared and stupid and I thought I could manage the situation without anyone getting hurt. He was crying. I could hear it in his voice, the way it caught and wavered. The company's dead, Brian. We're filing for bankruptcy next week. The Japanese partnership was our last hope, and when that fell apart, everything else collapsed. David quit 2 weeks ago. Just disappeared. Half the engineering team has already taken jobs elsewhere. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of Tokyo at night. Somewhere in the distance, someone was playing a guitar. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so fucking sorry. You deserved better. You deserved to be the one on that stage. And instead I let politics and fear turn me into someone I don't recognize. The old Brian, the one who'd spent 6 years believing that loyalty was the highest virtue, would have felt vindicated, would have said I told you so, or demanded apologies or explanations. But sitting there in Tokyo, having spent 3 months building something new and meaningful, I felt something unexpected. I felt sorry for him. Marcus, I need you to know something. What you did hurt me more than I thought possible. It made me question everything I believed about work, about loyalty, about my own worth. I know, but it also saved my life. The crying stopped. If you hadn't humiliated me on that stage, I never would have had the courage to leave. I would have stayed at NextGen forever, being undervalued and overworked, believing that someday it would pay off. You forced me to see that I was worth more than that. Brian, I forgive you, Marcus, not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to anger is just another way of letting you control my life. And I'm done with that. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. 6 months later, I'm writing this story from my new office in Tokyo, looking out at the city that gave me my life back. Sakura Innovations just closed a $50 million funding round, with me as Chief Technology Officer and Yuki as CEO. We're expanding to Silicon Valley next year, not because we have to, but because we want to. Yesterday I got an email from Tom. He'd found a new job at a startup in Austin, and wanted to thank me for inspiring him. To take the watching you walk away from NextGen showed me that loyalty is a two-way street, he wrote. I finally found a company that values me the way you should have been valued. Sarah reached out last month. She's starting her own marketing consultancy, and wanted advice on working with Japanese clients. We had coffee when she visited Tokyo, and she told me something I'll never forget. You didn't just leave NextGen, Brian. You showed all of us that there was life beyond that place. The strangest thing about success is how it changes your perspective on failure. Getting humiliated on that stage in Tokyo wasn't the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the best. It forced me to stop accepting less than I deserved, and start building the life I actually want. Last week I got a LinkedIn message from a young developer at a tech company in San Francisco. She'd heard my story somehow, probably through the Silicon Valley gossip network, and wanted it. She was being overlooked for promotions, watching less qualified colleagues get opportunities she'd earned, feeling invisible despite working harder than anyone else. How did you know when it was time to leave? She asked. I thought about that question for a long time before responding. You know it's time to leave when staying becomes more painful than the fear of leaving, I wrote back. You know it's time when you realize that loyalty to people who don't value you is just another form of self-harm. You know it's time when you start asking yourself not what if I, but what if I stay and never find out what I'm really capable of. Today I'm 35 years old. I live in a city that still surprises me every day. I work with people who challenge me to be better while respecting who I already am. I've learned to speak functional Japanese, developed a taste for good's sake, and discovered that taking risks isn't the same as being reckless. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you is exactly what you need to become who you're supposed to be. That stage in Tokyo, where I thought my career was ending, was actually where my life began.